It's time for an election breakdown, everybody. So we had an election 2 days ago, and there's a lot of decent news coming out of the election, but there's also a lot of superb news coming out of the election. In the Virginia governor's race, Northam beat Republican Gillespie. Now, this is the election where you can say, yeah, this one was decent. It's not superb news, because the reality is there's no denying that Northam is a pretty establishment Democrat. McAuliffe from Virginia was an establishment Democrat. He was governor. He's the least bad person in the race, but he also, I don't know how else to put it. He's the lesser of two evils, okay? He's the lesser of two evils. But Gillespie was a monster. He's an absolute monster, and he got defeated. A civil rights attorney who sued the cops over 70 times is now the new district attorney in Philadelphia. There are actually many solidly Republican seats in Georgia that flipped to Democratic in a special election. A criminal justice reformer flipped the Washington State Senate to Democrats. In New Jersey, for the governor's race, the Democrat Murphy won. He is now, of course, taking Chris Christie's seat. He supports legalizing marijuana, Murphy does, raising taxes on the rich, gun reform, raising the minimum wage. Now, that's one of those races where, it's a little up in the air, because he does also have an establishment streak. But at the same time, best of the two options. Okay. In my county in New York, a guy named George Latimer, who was an Our Revolution-backed candidate and a Working Families-backed candidate, beat a guy named Rob Astorino for county executive. Rob Astorino had taken a tremendous amount of money from the Mercer family. Mercer, of course, is the billionaire that props up Breitbart and far right-wing outlets. Astorino was a guy who was clearly on Trump's side. A transgender woman named Danica Roem, who ran on traffic problems, beat an anti-LGBTQ Republican who was focusing on pushing anti-trans bathroom bills. So that's awesome, because you have, and we covered one story involving Danica Roem where she responded to smears from the Republican. The Republican was playing identity politics and basically saying, you can't vote for a trans person. And then, Danica Roem was in a corner and came out and said, doesn't matter that I'm trans. That's irrelevant. And she ran on, hey, we're going to fix the traffic problems that we're dealing with. And she ended up winning. Maine voters expanded Medicaid. Now, the update to that story is that the Maine governor's like, no, we're not going to do that. He's an insane far-right Republican. This is a guy who literally is in favor of child labor. He said that. Yes, I'm in favor of child labor. So he might block it, but the Maine voters are crystal clear that they want to expand Medicaid. Democrats might make up an insurmountable 32-seat gap in the Virginia House of Delegates. This was something nobody was discussing going into the election. Nobody was saying, oh, hey, that's in the realm of possibility. Maybe the Democrats will overcome the 32-seat gap. But now, after the election, it's possible, and I think it's up to a recount now to determine whether or not that actually happens. But now we get to what I think is the best of the best news. Democratic Socialists running as Democrats and running as independents. One in Knoxville, won 2 seats in Pittsburgh. DSA members J.T. Scott and Ben Ewan Campen unseated longtime incumbents to join the Board of Aldermen. DSA member Charles Decker is going to represent Ward 9 in New Haven, Connecticut. And a Democratic Socialist beat an incumbent Republican in Virginia who was the minority whip. And he won with zero help from the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party in Virginia is tied to an energy company, and they're pushing, a pipeline. And this guy said, I don't want to have anything to do with the energy company, and I'm not in favor of the pipeline. So the Democrats gave this guy no help, and he still beat an incumbent Republican in Virginia, and he's a Democratic socialist. And he says, I am a Democratic socialist. They ran ads against this guy where they had his face like next to Marx on a poster. Oh, man. Wow. So what we're seeing is, in elections across the country, in the overwhelming majority of cases, people voted for the furthest left option that was there. Oh, that's good news, man. That's really good news. The only place where there were defeats is that in Ohio, the drug companies won on an issue, and there were some Our Revolution candidates who went down in Ohio. But in Atlanta, there was also the more establishment candidates won. And I think in Seattle, there was one of the more establishment candidates won. But overall, it is fantastic results from the election because, again, there were Democratic Socialist candidates all over the country that performed well. The Democrats far outperformed the polls in this election. And again, a lot of that has to do with the grassroots now rising up. But then also that's mixed with, yes, it was a legit anti-Trump vote. So I've said a million times, you're not going to win on just anti-Trump sentiment. That's not enough because then people go, I know what you're against, but what are you for? Well, the grassroots responded clearly. There are a lot of Democratic socialists who were running who go, yeah, let me tell you, I'm for Medicare for all. I'm for free college. I'm against these trade deals that outsource good American jobs. I'm for raising the minimum wage. So you had good candidacies, people who actually stood for something. But again, specifically in Virginia and New Jersey, there's already a poll out on this. And I think it was voters by 2-1 margin in Virginia said, I'm voting, and I'm voting for the Democrat to send a message to Trump to say, I don't like Trump. Because Trump's approval rating is hovering around 30% now. So it is super low. He is historically disliked for this point in his presidency. There's one poll that had his unpopularity rating at 62%. So it was by a 2-1 margin. They said, I'm not really voting for the Democrat as much as I'm voting against Trump and the Republicans. And again, that makes perfect sense because in Virginia, Northam was the most establishment Democrat that was running. And he won. And then when you go to the polls, people went, yeah, I wasn't really voting for him. I was voting against Trump. And then also in Virginia, it was by a 3-1 margin, according to the same poll, that they said, yeah, I wasn't even necessarily really voting for the Democrat as much as I was voting against Trump to send a message to Trump. And also in New Jersey, I'm sure there was a strong element of also fuck Chris Christie. We despise Chris Christie. Chris Christie, he wasn't up for re-election because of term limits and he was gone. But still, to vote for the Democrat is to say, whoa, we don't want to experience that again like we just went through with Chris Christie. There was a time when Chris Christie was the most popular governor in the country. And then now he's one of the most, if not the most, unpopular governors in the country. We covered a story. Wasn't his approval rating in like the teens? It was something like 18%. Some insanely low number. So what we're seeing here, again, is a mix of two different factors. It's fuck Trump. We really hate him. Oh my God, he's not anti-establishment like he said he was going to be on the campaign trail. He's not anti-interventionist like he said he was going to be on the campaign trail half the time. He really is a terrible president. We don't like him. There's a hefty dose of that, according to the polls. But then also, in most of these races, the furthest left option won. So that's why you see Democratic Socialists, some people who are DSA members, some people who say I'm a Democratic Socialist, but they're running as Democrats or independents, they won all across the country. And that's a positive sign, man. When Democrats stand for something, when they argue for the policy positions that the Democratic base wants, but also that the majority of the American people want, because that's what they do according to the polls, that's when we win. So good election results. But here's the thing. You cannot become complacent moving forward. Because honestly, what will happen is you're already seeing the establishment take the wrong message away from this. And they're going, oh, all that matters is being anti-Trump. Well, no, because again, if you dig into all the election results and you don't just isolate the Northam victory and the Murphy victory, if you dig into all of it, apart from just, the Virginia governorship and the New Jersey governorship, again, what you find is the furthest left option wins. The DSA candidates, even where the Democratic Party gave them no help, they won. So what does that tell you? It's not just an anti-Trump vote, although that is a big part of it. It is also the Democrats who stand for something are the Democrats who end up winning. And even when they have gigantic disadvantages in terms of money. So that's why we're doing what we're doing with Justice Democrats. And that's why I've said repeatedly that, listen, I have more allies outside of the party than in the party. And that's the fact of the matter. I'm aligned more with people who are Democratic Socialists, who are Green Party people, who are independents, who want to do a new third party, whatever the case is. Those people who've kind of said, fuck the system. Well, it turns out that those people just happens to be the case that we agree more on actual policies. We're there for Medicare for all, I'm for Medicare for all. They're for $15 minimum wage, I'm for $15 minimum wage. They're for ending the wars, I'm for ending the wars. So what that means is if we fight together to get the candidates, regardless of the labels, that's when we win. Which is why you see people who were independents winning, who were Democrats winning, who were Democratic Socialists winning. The furthest left option wins, even when there's an institutional disadvantage. As long as you get the word out there, as long as you put boots on the ground and knock on doors and canvass and tell everybody what you're about. Don't let the establishment hijack the conclusion from this election. Don't let them control the narrative. Because if they have it their way, they'll say, ignore all the Democratic Socialists who won all across the country. Ignore the fact that the furthest left option won all across the country. Just focus on Northam, the establishment Democrat, beating the Republican. And wow, would you look at that? That solidifies our narrative that, if we're only more like Hillary Clinton, we'll win in the future. No. You can't rest on just anti-Trumpism. It's got to be anti-Trump mixed with fighting for populist left policy positions. That's the way to guarantee victories moving forward.